Now it's time for today's perspective. Big weekend in French politics this past weekend as France gears up, of course, for its presidential elections in 4 months' time. Now, for a start of the weekend, one of the biggest parties, the right-leaning Republicans, picked their candidate. And in something of a shock, the winner turned out to be Valérie Pécresse. That is, the far-left candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon yesterday held his first large rally, as did the hitherto relatively unknown far-right Eric Zemmour, who's really surprised France with his strong, although now declining popularity in polls over the past few months. Zemmour's campaign start marred by violence as he was grabbed around the neck briefly, and anti-racism campaigners in the hall were assaulted as well. We're going to analyse where the campaign lies then. And joining us is Paul Smith, who's Associate Professor in French History and Politics at the University of Nottingham. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme. Let's start off by talking about the Republicans, if we can. I mean, Valérie Pécresse selected, just to explain to our viewers who might not be quite so familiar with who all these people are. She's from the Republicans. It's the party of Nicolas Sarkozy, of course. And at the end of the first round last week, perhaps the most favoured candidate amongst voters anyway, Xavier Bertrand, was knocked out and Pécresse made it through. How do you feel about it? Do you think how much of a surprise was it, I suppose?
I think it was a big surprise. We expected Bertrand to be not a shoo-in, but certainly to be in the second round against possibly Ciotti, who seemed to be the rising man as the election process went on. So it was, let's not deny it. It was certainly a surprise that she came through.
How do you think it'll go down with the voters? Because that's what's crucial, of course, for the Republicans. I mean, they might have been better keeping Xavier Bertrand, mightn't they?
Well, it depends. I mean, this is the party primary, a very limited primary, really, compared to last time, and it's really a bit of a blow for a more sort of social form of conservatism. Bertrand was seen as being from the social right, as opposed to Pécresse, who's more of a liberal in economic and perhaps less in social terms. So yes, a blow for one wing of the party, success for kind of the middle of the party, although this is a right-wing party, let's not beat about the bush, but also the challenge from the identitarian right that was the big surprise, really, was the vote for Ciotti in the first round.
Yeah, and talking of Ciotti, I mean, he almost won the nomination from the Republicans, and then he would have sat alongside both Marine Le Pen on the far right and the other candidate, Eric Zemmour, who I mentioned as well.
Yes, it's a very difficult circle to square, in fact, because already he's making noises that are a little bit critical of Pécresse. I mean, the problem for her, it's quite interesting that her diary this week is basically going out to see each of the four candidates who stood against her to kind of try to pull the party together. And this is one of the, there was this big scene after the second round on Saturday where everybody was there on the stage all smiling, but those smiles were pretty fixed. And her real problem is partly within the party, trying to pull that together behind her candidature and keeping Ciotti on side. I mean, not so much a blow, but a disappointment for her will have been that Ciotti pushed on from his 25-point-something% onto 39. So there's clearly a big wing within the party, although, of course, the numbers of voters is different. But there's a big part of the party that still is quite strongly attracted to its own right.
And do you think then that the people who voted for Eric Ciotti in that round there within the Republicans may now be tempted to vote for Eric Zemmour or Marine Le Pen?
Well, I think that the support within the right, supporters of the right are the French use the term friable. It can crumble, and I think there's a really strong temptation there. Now, it may well be actually, of course, that Pécresse, and this is on the other side of things, that Pécresse as a candidate appeals more to the centre ground, and in that case, one might say, well, the Républicains have, the members have made a wise choice. But there is still this tendency, and of course that's what Zemmour wants to jump on, is those voters who would have voted for maybe a Ciotti to try and pull them over to him, or indeed Le Pen will try and draw them over as well.
We had that launch yesterday, Eric Zemmour launching his campaign. I mean, there were several violent incidents. I mean, it doesn't bode well for the rest of this election, does it?
No, not at all. I mean, anybody grabbing a candidate by the throat is a bad thing. But being set upon, equally, a group of anti-racist campaigners who get into the meeting and then are set upon violently is not a good sign either. And this could, I mean, it suits Zemmour actually. This is part of his. A part of his whole kind of plan, straight out of the Trump playbook, will be to play on all of that. You see, you can't trust these people. I mean, look at the title of his campaign, Reconquête, la Reconquista. That's so very obvious. But the whole thing is to make as much noise, to create the weather as far as he can, and everything that happens, where you have to move a meeting because of fears of safety or security, or people turn up and disrupt your meeting. Of course you have the right to demonstrate against the candidate, but in a sense that also fuels his whole message.
Do you think he stands a chance? I mean, initially he was ahead, wasn't he, of Marine Le Pen in the polls? He slipped back a little bit, but who knows? He could well gain some ground again, couldn't he?
Well, he could do. I mean, it's very difficult to call at this stage. I was thinking yesterday about all the various favourites in December. Last time out it was François Fillon. All right, Hollande was the favourite in December the time before that. But if we go back through elections, it's very rare that the people that are at the head of the polls in December actually go on and win the election. There's still a long way to go in this campaign. I don't think Zemmour has enough. I mean, it's not an argument that he doesn't have a party behind him, because Emmanuel Macron didn't. So that's not the issue, but it's really a question of whether his kind of really hard, very radical, far-right politics is really capable of pulling enough supporters together, or whether there's space for him and Le Pen on the far right of French politics. It looks like like there isn't, and one would think not. But it really depends on how things play out over the next. Obviously, that's a syllogism to say that it depends how it plays out. But I don't think he's quite got enough to win the election.
And just very, very briefly, sorry to interrupt you. I just want to ask you very briefly about Emmanuel Macron as well. I mean, where does all this leave him, briefly, if you can?
Well, I mean, he's trying to stay out of it. Let this kind of identitarian thing blow itself out, and then step in. He's begun to organise himself. Ensemble Citoyen is this new kind of umbrella to support him, but he will want to come in. He wants to make it an election about the social issues in France, and that's not where Zemmour wants to play. Zemmour wants to play on the identity politics.
Paul Smith, thanks very much for being with us. Paul Smith joining us there from the University of Nottingham. Thanks very much.